Good morning, everyone. CBC News is reporting Gould urges Twitter to take more responsibility for content as election approaches. So I heard people on Twitter saying, oh no, the Canadian government's going to shut down Twitter. And I kind of dismissed it because I thought, no, not really. Nope. And maybe. Maybe. Here we go. So CBC News says, Democratic Institution Minister Karina Gould delivered a scolding to Twitter today, urging the social media platform to take more responsibility for its content ahead of the upcoming federal election. Quote, we know that their platform has been used and manipulated by foreign and malicious actors, and we're waiting to hear what their plans are here in Canada. She told reporters in the foyer of Parliament's West Block on Thursday. Last week, Gould unveiled what the government is calling a declaration of electoral integrity, which will see Ottawa work with online platforms to address online attempts to disrupt the upcoming federal election. Facebook, Google, and Microsoft have signed on to the declaration. I just want to point out here, really quickly, the 2016 Russian collusion thing, the report was filed, and there was no collusion and no obstruction from Trump. And the whole totality of Russia's Facebook manipulation was like $100,000 in Facebook ads. I think that's what it amounted to. This breathless idea that these foreign actors are going to be using a hidden hand of Facebook to manipulate our elections more than these attempts to silence speech that we've been seeing from this government is laughable, in my opinion. Really. Like, this fiction has been spun and spun and spun, and now people are enacting laws about it, and it's fiction. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it didn't happen. And if it did, or if it is happening, the more concerning issue is China's influence in Canada. And that's been borne out by Operation Sidewinder, among other reports by reputable counterintelligence people, along with the things that Tom Quiggin is talking about. If we want to talk about threats to national security, why are we ignoring those things? Why are we screaming at Twitter? Really, get refocused, Canada. Seriously. Anyway, back to this. This is ridiculous. Okay, quote, we haven't heard from Twitter on the declaration, said Gould. We haven't heard from Twitter in terms of what they're planning on doing for the upcoming election. Quote, I think it's important for Canadians to be aware that Twitter has essentially decided not to take responsibility for these activities. That Twitter is not committed to what they'll do here in Canada. And quite frankly, we're facing a time crunch. Michael Austin, head of government public policy at Twitter Canada, said the company had no comment to make at this time. Canada is just weeks away from the pre-writ and writ periods, which triggers a series of election laws. Changes to those laws contained in the government's Bill C-76 require companies that sell online ads to set up a registry of political ads. Companies are also prohibited from accepting election ads from outside Canada. Google has announced that it won't run Canadian political advertising during the upcoming election. Facebook says that it will and has committed to setting up the required registry. Gould said the government hasn't heard from Twitter about whether it will comply with the online ad registry. When asked if the department is considering any punitive action against the social media company, a department spokesperson said the ministry comments today were about, quote, applying pressure. Gould's announcement of the declaration of electoral integrity last week came just before an international coalition of MPs dedicated to fighting the spread of disinformation and hate speech online met in Ottawa to grill officials from various tech companies, including Facebook, Twitter, and Google, who didn't show up, by the way. It's kind of funny. And really, get focused. This isn't the place to be focusing our attention, in my opinion. Again, I think it's distractive and divisive. Spencer Fernando is talking about the Canada Jobs Report, and here's why it's not exactly as it seems. And I think this is important because I've seen on Twitter again that people are throwing this jobs number around and saying, this proves us to be right. It's the best economy since the 1970s. Be quiet. And no, there's actually the details, and they matter in this case. Okay, Spencer Fernando says, the old way of measuring the job market is simply isn't showing us the real picture anymore. There's a growing disconnect between the government figures being released on the job market and what people are feeling on the ground. Surveys consistently show that Canadians feel pessimistic about the economy, say the economy feels weak, are struggling with immense amounts of debt, and feel like they're falling behind as the cost of living outstrips any gain they may get in their pay. Meanwhile, the government releases statistics saying the job market is hitting one record after another with supposedly record 1 month job gains and record low unemployment. So what's going on here? Two things. First, there's almost certainly some sort of manipulation going on behind the scenes as a desperate government does whatever they can to ensure good numbers as the election nears. Second, the way the government measures the economy and particularly the job market, is brutally flawed. For example, the latest job report says there were 27,700 jobs created in May. That sounds good. However, the number of people in the labor force, which many consider a more accurate economic gauge, fell by 49,200. Business website BNN Bloomberg said that it was, quote, one of the largest one-month declines. The unemployment rate is also supposedly at a record low of 5.4%. Again, however, this is because 76,000 people simply gave up looking for work and are no longer considering unemployment. Are no longer consider unemployed under the current system. BNN also points out, quote, the composition of the gains was not particularly robust, reflecting an increase of 61,500 among self-employed. The number of employees in the economy has actually declined. That self-employed number is very important to look at. In today's economy, we're increasingly seeing people lose secure jobs with benefits while then becoming self-employed in far more precarious positions. So while there may technically be some jobs being created, the quality of those jobs is often worse and leaves people far more vulnerable. Unfortunately, none of that gets included or discussed when the government pushes their messaging. And the Liberal government will certainly use this latest job report for false confirmation of their economic policies. That's why we need to look at the deeper picture, because the deeper look shows us why there is such a gap between the government, what the government is saying, and what we're all feeling on the ground. Interesting. And I think that that's true. There's a big disconnect, and these falling job numbers just Alberta alone is being absolutely torn apart by the decreased investment, the rock bottom oil prices, the inability to get the oil to market. It's incredible. Really. It's a very, very sad state of affairs, and it affects Canada, and it will affect Canada very, very in an impactful way. Okay, here's a crazy story. Talk about miscarriage of justice. This is just wow. My jaw was on the floor, and the way they end this article, pay attention. Okay, it's interesting. CBC News is reporting, quote, Manitoba man jailed after judge says justified self-defense went too far, killing home intruder. A Manitoba judge says a man was justified in trying to defend himself from a late-night intruder, but sentenced him to jail time for killing the intruder when he took that defense too far. Dakota Pratt, 28, was sentenced on Thursday to 5 years in prison after a jury in Brandon's Court of Queen's Bench, found him guilty in April of manslaughter in the attack that killed Vincent Bunn. Court heard Bunn, 21, entered Pratt's home on the Birdtail Sioux First Nation, about 115 kilometers northwest of Brandon, Manitoba, in the early morning of September 2nd, 2016. Pratt, who was asleep in a basement bedroom, awoke to a feeling of being stabbed in the head, court heard. He got up and found a knife-wielding intruder in his room and, not knowing who the person was, chased him into the hallway. Quote, Mr. Pratt was the victim of an unprovoked assault and knew he was in a struggle for his own life, Court of Queen's Bench Justice Robert Cummings said in his sentencing decision. This is not waking up to someone yelling at you, someone cutting his head open. That's somebody who is showing from the beginning how serious they are. Defense lawyer Matt Gould. A struggle ensued and continued through the home's main floor and then outside onto the deck, where Bunn was stabbed with his own knife 13 times, according to the agreed-upon facts read out by Cummings at Pratt's sentencing hearing. Court was told the final stab to Bunn's heart was the fatal one, and that he was kicked a number of times afterwards. It is unknown when exactly Pratt got Bunn's knife during the struggle. However, Pratt suffered a significant blood loss and wounds to his scalp sometime during the incident. He was justified in taking defensive action, but the juries concluded that his taking of the knife of Mr. Bunn and stabbing him multiple times went beyond what was necessary for self-defense, Cummings said. Pratt's defense lawyer, Matt Gould, asked for a 3-year sentence. The Crown recommended a sentence of 8 years. With time served, Pratt will spend about 2.5 more years in jail. I was hoping for him to come home, Gould told the CBC News. With a 3-year sentence, he would have been very, very close to going home. I thought it was a very understandable argument, a very clear case of ... self-defense. Gould said, this is not waking up to someone yelling at you, someone's cutting your head open. That's somebody who's showing from the beginning how serious they are. Bad feelings and jealousy. Pratt was originally charged with manslaughter in Bunn's death. A second-degree murder charge was laid following a preliminary hearing, with the Crown rejecting the self-defense argument. At trial, the Crown told the jury that there had been bad feelings between the two men, both of whom lived on the Birdtail Sioux First Nation at the time, and jealousy surrounding a relationship. Both had been drinking prior to the attack, but at separate locations on the reserve. Actually, I want to point out here, one of them had been sleeping, right? Pratt had been asleep, and maybe he had some beers before he went to bed, but they weren't drinking at the same time. One of them was asleep. Okay. Really. Jealousy surrounding relationship, both have been drinking. Right. It says prior to the attack, but at separate locations. Come on. Really? Just prior to the attack. Before the guy showed up at his house, he was drinking, and the other guy was sleeping. And yeah, okay. Back to the article. The Crown asserted that Bunn was welcome in the house where the attack occurred based on testimony by Pratt's mother-in-law who owned the house. Quote, that may be, but the impression was that was left with me was that he was welcome for supper or to visit, not to live in the house, Cummings said. It was Mr. Pratt who had the legal right to sleep in his ... house. Mr. Bunn arrived in the dead of night armed with a knife, the judge added. I'm unsure why the Crown had such difficulty acknowledging these facts. The only witness to the fight was Pratt, court was told. He initially denied to police on numerous occasions that a knife was used in the attack, which Cummings called a concerted effort to lie about what happened on the deck. The Crown stated that this was clearly false, but that other parts of his statement should be accepted as true because they are against Mr. Pratt's interests. I do not follow the logic of this argument. Okay, I'm willing to bet, and I don't know the particulars of this case, but I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here. If he had just been woken out of sleep, being attacked by somebody, and had successfully defended himself, and when you defend yourself, you don't ask the guy who was trying to kill you, as far as you're concerned, if they're okay. Right? You put them down and you make sure they stay down, right? And holy cow. And at that point, he's probably in shock. And at that point, probably the police showed up and said, what happened here? And he said, I don't know. I woke up and this is what? And they said, did you stab this guy? And he was like, what? Right? And shock does weird things. Like you're not thinking clearly when you're in shock. And so that's something to note. And I feel like, man, all of this stuff is just terrible how this came out and how this... Okay, anyway, back to the article. Court was told a considerable amount of Pratt's blood was found in his bedroom following the attack, partially corroborating his version of events, in that he was acting in self-defense. Quote, logic suggests that when there's an intruder in the house, that it would make good sense to ascertain the identity of the intruder and ensure that he be expelled from the house, Cummings said in his decision. There is no reliable evidence to determine when Mr. Pratt had possession of the knife, but it is certain that he did become the aggressor and go beyond what was necessary to defend himself. He added, that's our brother. His life is gone now because of Dakota. That's Alicia Ben, Vincent's brother's sister, and that's quotes from later in the article. Okay. Cummings said that while some of the violence can be explained by the sudden nature of Bunn's initial attack on Pratt, the repeated stabbing and kicking took it too far. Court was told Pratt suffered various traumas over his life, including sexual and physical abuse, as well as issues with substance abuse, but showed remorse for the killing. His only prior conviction was for an assault. He understood that at the end of the day, somebody died, and he was responsible for that, and this really came down to why, Gould said. Pratt has been in custody since the attack, at times in segregation for his own safety after being bullied by other inmates, court was told. Family glad trial is over. This is how they end the article. Outside court, Bunn's siblings said they're glad the trial and sentencing are finally over. It was very hurtful, said Sister Tiffany Bunn of the 10-day trial. It was hard. It was tough. That's our brother. His life is gone now because of Dakota, said Alicia Ben, another of Vincent's sisters. I felt like the judge was giving our family a fairly hard time in sentencing and at the trial and everything. They remembered their brother as a funny, caring man. He was a happy person, said Ben. He was very funny, a great guy. He was always outgoing, said Ben's brother, Nicholas Ben. Said Bunn's brother, Nicholas Ben. He could always bring a smile to your face. Here in court, they just showed his bad side of the choices he made, his mistakes. But through all of that, he was a really good guy. The siblings said they are satisfied their brother's killer will spend more time behind bars. Like, my jaw was on the floor when I read that the first time. Really, CBC? Really, MSNBC, CBC? Really? Like, seriously. Despicable. Despicable. And in other news, federal liberals break the law and solicit funds from US and the UK, and probably nothing will come of it. The Stars.com is reporting. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party ran a series of fundraising ads targeting American and UK audiences on Facebook, despite it being illegal to accept donations from foreign citizens. The party used its official Facebook account, as well as Trudeau's, to solicit donations from the US and UK for a week in March. Advertising party official Brandon Cayley says was an error. Cayley said no money was collected from foreign citizens through the ad campaign. A limited set of grassroots fundraising ads on Facebook inadvertently ran briefly both inside and outside of Canada when that wasn't the intention here, said Cayley, a spokesperson for the Liberal Party, in a statement to the Star. Officer, I didn't know that I was speeding. I thought it was a 70 zone, and so I was going 80. I didn't realize it was a 50. Sorry about that. Misunderstanding on my part. No, you're going to give me a ticket anyway? Sir, don't you understand? I did not understand and know that the speed limit was different. And so I was following the rules as I saw, and it was an accident. You're still going to give me a ticket? One rule, one set of laws for the liberals and one set for everybody else, right? Don't the conservatives dare do this because they'll get a fine. Anyway, back to this. The ads were removed the following week. The Liberal Party has also been reviewing with Facebook how the ads were able to extend into the other places that you've referenced. By law, Canadian political parties can only accept donations from Canadian citizens or permanent residents. Facebook is one of the world's most powerful advertising platforms, allowing companies and organizations to drill down on micro-targeted audience to get their messages across. It is heavily used by both the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party in Canada. The platform allows you to target demographics, networks of people, specific types of behavior, or interests and locations. Typically, the target location is entered by an advertiser via a drop-down menu while placing the advertisement. But Facebook also offers custom audience and lookalike audience feature, allowing advertisers to upload email lists or website traffic to build a custom audience and then target similar lookalike Facebook audiences. It's not clear if the Liberals were using those features for the US and UK advertisements, but the party did not immediately respond to that question. I think it points to an emergent set of issues that we have to deal with, said Lisa Young, a professor at the University of Calgary studying election law and digital issues. We're increasingly setting up our election law to be very conscious of borders and avoiding foreign interference. But what this points to is that in the digital world, borders don't matter. It's this very amorphous thing, and the boundaries between domestic and internationals are unclear in many respects. So it's paradoxical that at the same time we're trying to be that much more rigorous about drawing lines. It's harder and harder to draw the lines themselves because the digital world is so global. Nope. I've got to tell you, I work in advertising now, and I work in websites and I manage ads and stuff. And part of my job is to buy ads. And I can tell you, they know exactly where the ads are going to play, exactly how many impressions they're going to get. It's not like it's going to leak, right? Because they'll give you free impressions if it leaks. And maybe that sometimes happens a little bit. But usually it's they forgot to turn off the ad at the end of the month. They don't just leak into other demographics willy-nilly. They have very, very good geofencing these days. And they can make it so an ad will show up in a certain postal code and not in another postal code. It is very targeted. This is just bunk. Like, oh, the online world is so global. It's so we couldn't possibly keep the ads into Canada. No, absolute garbage. Absolutely. So I just want to point that out. I scroll down a little bit back to the article. Canadian political parties are increasingly turning to Facebook to blast out their partisan messaging. In recent months, the Liberal government and the opposition Conservatives have been particularly active. In May, the Liberals were pushing an advertisement trying to link Conservative leader Andrew Scheer to Ontario Premier Doug Ford, suggesting Scheer would cut vital services at the expense of everyday Canadians. In June, the Liberals shifted to promoting their climate plan, social policies, and economic record. The Conservatives, meanwhile, split the last 2 months between attacking Trudeau over recent scandals and promoting Scheer's pocketbook message. The opposition party also took shots at the Bloc Québécois in French-language Facebook ads. Facebook's expected to publicly launch an advertising library by the end of June, collecting all political and issue-based advertising in the lead-up to the federal election later this year. The registry is required under a new law brought in by the Liberals last year for any platform publishing political advertisements during the election period. Google, Facebook's main competitor in the advertising business, opted to refuse Canadian political advertising in the run-up to the election. Interesting. And so, between Twitter and Facebook and Google, and Facebook being probably the most powerful ad network in the world, and it has a lot of people on it, but I think people are starting to leave. I haven't been on Facebook in a while. I go on every so often for work, but most of the time I don't go on Facebook because it's A, it's a time suck, and B, it is clearly not a place for me. I value free speech, and I value not being shaped in my speech. And I've said this before, but Facebook doesn't offer you access to your friends. Facebook offers you access to a version of your friend that will keep you coming back to Facebook to argue with them. Think about who you spend time most of the time on Facebook messaging. Do you know those people? Do you talk to those people? Do those people care about your life? Probably not. Not more than the dopamine hit they get when you hit back and respond with some words, right? And really, I really looked at my Facebook feed and the people I spent time arguing with, and man, it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth my time. And so I did this. So here we are, more than a year later. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. Thank you, and check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Thanks for watching.